After the release of Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 231, a lot has changed with the Battle of the Strongest. It isn't looking great for Sukuna at the moment, but at the same time, all he has to do is survive a little longer and Mahoraga is going to adapt to Unlimited Void. So realistically, the odds really aren't stacked in Gojo's favour. The question has now become, how on earth is Gojo going to beat Sukuna within this time limit? Now I think Gojo likely has an ace up his sleeve, as he seemed unfazed by Sukuna's statement that he only has a short amount of time before he adapts to Gojo's technique. This could also be the fact that when Sukuna adapts to Limitless, Gojo isn't going to instantly lose, although it is heavily implied looking at the Jujutsu High students' reaction. To be totally honest, I don't really see Gojo winning this battle, simply due to narratively speaking, we need to see some of the Jujutsu sorcerers fight. For example, it is basically guaranteed at this point that we'll see Kashimo vs Sukuna, as well as Maki, Yuta and Hikari vs Kenjaku, which I am very excited for. But if Gojo was to survive, the likelihood is, unless he was left incapacitated, he would destroy Kenjaku and the rest of the important cursed spirits. But that's just my reason as to why I think Gojo is going to lose. But in this video, I want to explore the idea that Gojo does end up winning, and how he'd actually manage to win with his back pressed up against the wall and the clock slowly ticking for his demise. So it's pretty obvious that Gojo currently hasn't shown his full power. So far in the fight, it has been a battle of domains, in which for the most part, Sukuna has been winning. There has been a little bit of combat here and there, with Gojo actually landing a few significant blows onto Sukuna, which forced Sukuna to use reverse curse technique. However, the problem is, while Gojo was constantly losing his domain battle against Sukuna, he was being hit with Cleave and Dismantle, which was tearing him apart. As a result of this, he was basically forced to constantly use reverse curse technique, and we found out in the last few chapters that this has been destroying part of his brain, and subsequently, he can no longer use his domain. Gojo is also being heavily nerfed as to what abilities he can use. This is because if he was to use anything related to his Infinity or Limitless, Mahoraga would be able to adapt and Gojo would be in a very difficult situation. This is why we've seen Gojo primarily hit Sukuna with red and blue curse techniques and nothing to do with his Limitless. This means that it is very possible that Gojo has been hiding a hidden ability from Sukuna. So Gojo was sealed for around 2 weeks in the prison realm, and it is unclear as to whether time actually moves slower in there or whether it's just the user has no concept of time within it. But let's just assume that time runs at normal pace within the prison realm. It looked to me like Gojo wasn't necessarily incapacitated whilst within the prison realm, so this leaves room for Gojo to actually train. And this is where the theories of what Gojo could have created whilst within the prison realm come into fruition. Gojo, being the strongest sorcerer, hasn't been able to train much, simply due to how much he has to do as a Jujutsu sorcerer. Being the strongest sorcerer alive means he has to take on the most difficult cursed spirits, as well as doing this the most frequently out of any sorcerer to maintain the balance of cursed spirits to sorcerers. So with this time to himself, it is extremely likely that Gojo, not knowing when he would be unsealed, would use this time effectively. Alright, so my first theory on what this could be is Gojo using white cursed energy reversal. So think about it this way, Megumi's cursed technique, which Sukuna uses and relies on, is the 10 shadows technique. This technique is dependent on the shadows to summon Shikigami. So theoretically, using white reversal, Gojo could eliminate all of the shadows surrounding Sukuna, meaning that Sukuna could no longer summon Mahoraga or any Shikigami. This would also mean that Sukuna could no longer adapt to any of Gojo's techniques, and therefore the odds would be shifted into Gojo's favour once again. The reason it's going to get rid of all the shadows is because white would be the representation of light. Say white was to be summoned around Gojo, it would illuminate all the area around him. This could be so broken that all the area within a 1 kilometer radius of Gojo was illuminated. This would mean Sukuna has nowhere to run. The way white would work is the amalgamation of red, blue and purple. We know that from the colour spectrum that combining all the colours in the rainbow would lead to a white colour. This could be the way that Gojo manages to form hollow white. Alright, so my next theory is going to be an application of Gojo's domain expansion. This wouldn't require Gojo to actually open his domain, but instead he would just be using Limitless. This technique is slightly risky, but as a last ditch effort it could actually work at defeating Sukuna. So the concept of Gojo's domain is that Gojo, when opening his domain, will supply everyone inside with an infinite amount of information. This means they can't actually comprehend anything, and it normally will just make them unable to move, as they can no longer process anything. We saw this against Jogo, and it seems that no matter the strength of the user, it almost guarantees to make them unable to move. We also know that just 0.2 seconds of this domain was enough in Shibuya to hospitalize every citizen within the radius for a couple months. Currently, no user with reverse curse technique has been hit with this, so it would be interesting to see whether that could be a counter for this domain expansion. But this will probably be Gojo's last fight in the series. so it's unlikely that we will ever see this interaction. So with Infinite Void being explained, the theory is that instead of overwhelming the user with an infinite amount of information, Gojo is now able to unload an infinite amount of punches. So theoretically, he would be able to punch once, but when this punch is applied to the user, due to his manipulation of infinity, he would be able to punch Sukuna an infinite amount of times, which would theoretically one-tap Sukuna. This may seem a little overpowered, but maybe a drawback of using this would be Gojo's fists receive an infinite amount of impacts with the person he punches, which would cause infinite force onto his hand, likely blowing it off. This would mean Gojo would not be able to use Hollow Purple or his domain expansion ever again, which would probably bring him onto a much lower level and scale him with some of the top Jujutsu high students. Another way to think about this idea would be that Gojo using Limitless and Infinity can open another timeline. So similar to Divergent Fist, after Gojo punches Sukuna, maybe a second after Gojo comes into contact with his opponent, the user is hit again, but from an alternative timeline. And this could be stacked multiple times, so Gojo is like comboing Sukuna in different timelines. And Sukuna can't actually stop anything but the Gojo in his timeline, making this attack completely unguardable. Obviously this again would be a bit broken, but I'm sure there could be some drawbacks that prevent Gojo from being able to spam this, and also why he'd waited so late in the fight to use it. Gojo likely knows that if he uses his secret technique, he will no longer be able to fight, so he's probably waiting till the end of the fight so he can guarantee that he can finish Sukuna. Another problem which does arise is that if Gojo was to kill Sukuna, then his plan to free Megumi would fail. This is likely why we haven't seen Gojo with that much killing intent so far in this fight. In chapter 231, Gojo stated that he would kill Sukuna before his time runs out, and Angel states that it seems as though Gojo has forgotten about saving Megumi. If this was the case, it would make sense as to why Gojo would unleash his ability and kill Sukuna, because he was so enraged that he lost all rationality and forgot the original plan. A new technique which we have already seen Gojo use would be his ability to affect gravity. Gojo used this in his fight with Sukuna when he was pulling debris from Malevolent Shrine as well as Sukuna into a ball kind of shape, like one of the Rinnegan abilities from Naruto. Actually, come to think of it, in chapter 231 there was a lot of Naruto references, because to me it looked like Gojo was actually using the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Anyways, getting back on track, if Gojo was able to pull Sukuna into perhaps a larger sphere that takes Sukuna much longer to break out of, this could work perfectly in conjunction with Hollow Purple. This is because it would almost be a sure hit and Sukuna would just be deleted, especially if he can react in time. Being so we have seen this ability already and it wasn't the most effective, it is likely that this won't be the way Gojo finishes off Sukuna, but it's definitely something to consider. But like I said at the start of the video, I still think that Sukuna will likely win this fight, but it is fun to think about all of the applications of Limitless, as it truly is such a versatile technique, and when in the hands of Satoru Gojo, it truly has infinite possibilities. However, leave your ideas of how Limitless can be adapted to create a new technique in the comments down below. Also, if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to me, as well as helping the channel grow. I know I ask this a lot, but if you have any suggestions on how I could improve my content, as well as some theories you want me to cover, then put them in the comments down below, and I'll try my best to improve. I want to bring the best content possible to you guys, so any help is muchly appreciated. But with that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.